Morning all.
Morning. It's that big silence as everybody filters in.
Spoil the silence anytime you like.
There you go.
Oh, like 40 people in there. I think we're expecting like 55-ish.
I would just move my desk down so I look taller. So I think I look about 6'4", but I'm not really.
Morning, everybody. Great to see you all. Thanks for giving us some of your time this morning. I think we're close to the number that we were expecting, so I suggest we make a start if that's okay. One or two more might join us as we begin, but hopefully they won't miss anything critical. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Karen Lee. I'm one of the directors in estates, and space management and timetabling falls within my remit, which is why I'm involved in this. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity just to talk you through some of the changes, and more importantly to have time to answer any questions that might occur to you. I'll let Catherine and Andrina, who are the co-hosts for this morning's session, introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the substance of the presentation. So, Catherine.
Hi, thanks, Karen. My name's Catherine Madden. I'm the Deputy Head of People and Organisational Development for the College of MBLS, and I'm also aligned to this timetabling project as the P&OD partner. So I'm here today and I'm just keeping a track of the attendees. So we're now at 55, so we're pretty much there. And I'll also just let you know that I am recording this session so that we can hopefully use it for anyone who's unable to attend. So it's up to you if you want to have your camera on or off, but just for awareness, we are recording this. Okay, thanks.
Andrina.
I'm Adrina for the timetabling team. If you're on this call, you probably already know me because you're involved in timetabling in some way. So I lead the current timetabling team and will be quite involved, or very involved, with the new model at the hub of the timetabling team.
Thanks very much. Right, I'm going to screen share. That probably means I'm not going to be able to see people. So do feel free to put, I think the Q&A is enabled. So if you've got questions during the presentation, feel free to pop them in there, or do the usual hand raising, and either Catherine or Andrina will spot you, even if I don't. So don't feel that you have to wait until the end, although we built in time at the end to deal with questions. But if there is a burning issue, then do feel free to interject as needed. Right. You all see that. Everyone see the presentation? Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay. So we've done the introductions. This is the rest of the agenda. So some of this I think you may have already seen in terms of what the proposed operating model for the future looks like. But just to make sure that everybody's on the same page and everybody's got access to the same information, we'll be repeating a little bit of that and what the structures are within the team, both for the timetabling team itself, but also where that fits in the wider directorate. And then we'll look at some of the activity and working patterns, and really importantly, looking at the elements that certainly during the transitional period will remain with the colleges, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that transitional period is for and why we're approaching it in this way. And then, as I said, most important thing is to make sure there's plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So as a result of partly the timetabling transformation project that many of you will be aware of and probably had some contact with, but also the fact that we're moving to a new timetable system within the next 2 years, we're bringing together a unified team that will provide timetabling services right across the university. So a hub rather than the highly devolved model that we have just now. That will sit within the current space management timetabling team, which is within the Estates Directorate. So that's where that central hub will operate from. Critically, what we're trying to do is to make sure that we produce and manage the timetable for the university effectively, but also that we achieve efficient and flexible utilisation of the teaching estate so that we make the best of what we have. And also that we can plan for the future. So as things change, as we evolve, whether that's around learning and teaching, whether that's around student numbers, whether that's around balance between research and teaching, we need to be able to respond and adapt. So having that efficiency and flexibility is increasingly important. What the team is also responsible for is managing that relationship and getting buy-in when processes change or systems change, and making sure that we're working for the benefit of staff and students. Customer service is absolutely central. That's an absolutely key element of the work that the team will be doing, making sure that as a service provider that service is prompt, so that it's responsive, that we're managing change effectively, and that we're handling a high volume of transactions in a way that is customer centric, so that prompt and responsive service. We also want to make sure that we have a consistent approach to timetabling and space allocation right across the university. That's for staff and student benefit, as well as just making sure that we can optimise processes and systems that are available to us. The team will also contribute to a number of specialist activities, and we've called out 4 here in particular, which will feature quite prominently in the new team structure. So one's around accessibility, and that's for both staff and students. So really understanding the needs of our students and the needs of our staff in relation to accessibility, and whether that is physical access to a room, or whether that is accessible features within a room, or whether that is how the timetable is constructed. So where people perhaps need activity consolidated, or indeed gaps between activity, making sure that all of that is understood so that we can build a timetable that really works for those individuals and their particular requirements. The next one's around curriculum transformation. And there's a lot of that happening, or going to be happening over coming years. Some of that's driven by things like Curriculum for Life, and I'm not sure how familiar people are with that at the minute, but it's about that broader curriculum skills development, future skills for students that's being developed. Maureen Bain, the Assistant Vice Principal, is leading on all of this, and we're working closely with her on that. But there's other elements of curriculum transformation. Some of that will be driven by opportunities that the estate provides. Some of it will be driven by things like the portfolio review that's ongoing at the minute. So keeping abreast of that, working with colleagues that are leading on that to make sure that we can take that into account and we can support it, model it, assist with enabling that transformation. We've then got Keystone, so that'll be one of the biggest changes on the campus in the near future. And the opportunity that provides to really think differently about how we deliver key elements of our teaching, particularly teaching which takes place in labs, whether that's PC labs or wet labs or dry labs. The scale of the lab offering in the building will allow us to do something really quite different and think differently about how we use that space. But it's more than that. It's about all the activity that happens, not in the labs, but happens elsewhere, and making sure that the totality works and works smoothly. So working with what will be a new role, the role of academic director in the Keystone, will be really important. And that work has to happen quite a long way out. So we need to be starting to think about Keystone and that enabling work probably in the next 12 months so that we're ready for the 2028 opening. And the final one is around space management. And that reflects all the other things that we use our space for, that we use teaching space and indeed other kinds of space, whether that's meeting, collaboration, research, making sure that we can do really practical things like get in and maintain it or refurbish it. So planning for that kind of activity, working with colleagues in estates, but also thinking about what we want those spaces to do and what that means in terms of how we might refurbish or reconfigure or indeed repurpose. So all those specialist areas are things that the team currently look at, but they are all growing in importance and in volume. So having that specialist focus within the new team structure will be really important, and provides a really interesting way of developing our thinking about timetabling and space management. The other key aspect of the role, and why we've called a number of the roles partner roles, is that work with colleges. So making sure that within the centre we fully understand the delivery of learning and teaching, the planning, the thinking around that, the aspiration around that, in order that we can effectively schedule. We want to make sure that there's a continued focus on student experience. And we also want to make sure that there's really good insight into future plans and ambition, so that we can then reflect back into some of those specialist areas. What does that mean, and how do we best support the colleges in achieving those ambitions? And then finally, making sure that we really embed the changes and those new working practices locally, because even if the activity or some of the activity is happening in that hub, that will impact what happens within schools and colleges. So we need to make sure that that is seamless so that it all works. And then the final point, as I mentioned at the beginning, is some of the activity that relates to timetabling will continue to reside in the colleges. That will at least be until we implement a new system. We expect that the new system will provide some new opportunities, some different ways of working, and that might change the activity that resides in the colleges, or it may leave it there because we decide that operationally that's the most effective. So we're not making any hard decisions on that, but recognising that the next 2 years are a transitional phase as we both move to that hub and also implement a new system, and we will then review what's the most effective way of working beyond that. So what does the team structure look like? As Andrina said, she currently manages the central team and will continue to manage this expanded team. And we've got then within that some data analysis, so some expertise around our data analysts and modelling activity, and that continues to be an important focus of what we do. That remains largely unchanged. But we're then introducing a number of these partner roles, so that will be partnering with the colleges or indeed with university services and some of our external providers, and also those specialist areas, that specialist functional or functional expertise that I've just outlined. Those partner roles will be supported by a number of timetabling advisors. They'll be doing a lot of the activity and translating those aspirations, those needs, those changes into the timetabling system, and making sure that what we're providing for is what meets the requirements of our users, our students, our staff, and aligns with those school and college ambitions, or indeed with the specialist area that they're looking at. We're going to retain a number of grade 4 posts, but initially that is just on a fixed term basis up to the end of July 2027. And that's to support during that transitional phase and as we implement a new system. Once we're at that point, we'll be clearer about whether or not that sort of function needs to be retained for the long term and they may move to permanent roles, or indeed if there is a different mix required within the team. Or if in fact there's no longer a requirement for that. So we will have those, but they will be fixed term roles. Where does it fit in terms of the directorate as a whole? So that's quite a big chart, and I don't expect you to be able to read all the detail of it right on this screen, but just to give you some context. So Peter Haggerty is the Executive Director of Estates. And there are 8 directors that report, well, 6 directors, 2 assistant directors that report into Peter. And we cover all aspects of the estate and estate management, and that ranges from safety and resilience through things like sustainability to my area of the business, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail, to the construction projects, to our joint ventures, etc. So everything that you could possibly think of that is any way related to managing the estate all sits within this directorate. Within my area of the business, which is that strategy, planning, administration, I've got 6 quite discrete areas. So whereas in some of the other departments, everyone's kind of doing the same thing. So if it's projects, they're all about our construction projects. I have this eclectic portfolio which keeps us all keeps us all on our toes and keeps it all interesting. So that covers things like planning, both planning in terms of planning for the estate, as well as planning the detail around sort of space planning, so reconfiguration, redesign, thinking differently about how we support new activities, whether that's teaching, research, or workspace. I also have communication engagement, a raft of business services which just keep the directorate ticking over. And some executive supports. That's where our PAs and so on sit. And then the team that is most relevant for this conversation, the space management timetabling team. So what's depicted there is the current structure, and we've just shared what the new structure would look like. So the new team will sit within a directorate that is around 850 people strong. And has a lot of diversity, so it'll be really great to bring some new insights, some new eyes, some different perspectives into all of that. And we do a lot where we're looking to collaborate and make sure people have an opportunity to learn and engage right the way across the directorate, because that does enhance your ability to perform well in this space management timetabling function. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the activity and working patterns that we anticipate for this new team, and Andrina might want to elaborate a little bit more on some of that because she's very close to the detail. So the kind of activity that we're doing spreads far beyond just timetabling for classes, for core teaching, but we're looking at allocating space for a whole raft of other activities. Lots of university business, so that will be some of our ceremonial activities, so things like the exams and graduations that are happening right now. There's also a lot of public-facing events, how our students use the campus, so use for study space, for clubs and societies, etc., and a whole raft of non-teaching events, and making sure that all of those can happen in a way that is seamless and works well, so they're not conflicting with each other. It's a real art form, so making sure that the student society who is singing and dancing is not next to a short course that's doing counselling and quite quiet things. So making sure that there's a real understanding of the nature of the activities and where they are best suited is really important. And making sure that we've got that long-term view. So for things like university business, being able to plan out when exams, graduations, key activities are happening over a multi-year time frame is really important, so that we can look at how everything else fits alongside that, not least time to get in and refurbish or maintain the rooms on the campus. Those relationships with colleges, schools and services are really important, and we know that a lot of time will be invested in that. And so we would expect, certainly in the early period of operating, that might be where the bulk of time is spent, really getting immersed in those structures, really understanding and translating what that means for both the rest of the team, but also for the activity that we undertake. There's lots of routine service delivery. And I guess for many of you, currently you're on the other end of that. You're the one submitting requests for changes, requests for additional activity, etc., etc. Under the new team, you'd be the ones responding to those, so making sure that we get that prompt, that efficient customer service, and deal with all of those, but within the context of everything else that is happening. So that balance between, if I put this event in this room, what's happening next door, what else is happening in that building, how do we make the estate function well? The engagement on those thematic areas, those specialisms, we expect to ramp up. So probably a relatively gentle start with some of that. Some of them are more pressing than others in as much as so if we take accessibility as an example, planning the processes, the engagement, the conversations around that needs to happen quite early on, because we need to be doing that for the next timetabling cycle. Something like Keystone will be a slower build as we just start to explore the opportunities and things that building will enable, and start to work with academic colleagues about how they might want to respond to that and the changes that will occur. So it'll be variable, but with all of them, we need to start now, because there isn't an endless amount of time. Understanding current and, more importantly, future learning and teaching will be really important. And so those engagements around college aspirations, school aspirations, curriculum transformation, etc., are all really important. But because they will be happening across different individuals, making sure that we've got real time within the team to come together to consider that holistically, and share that information with each other will be really important. So we'd expect a lot of that engagement to be happening, and happening quite intensely over the period. The team currently works a minimum of 2 days a week on campus. Typically during key periods that will ramp up. And we'd expect as we move into this new role, this new function, that onboarding phase, just bringing a team together, starting to build that team, getting people up to speed with what could be completely new areas of business that they've not been involved in before, is likely to require more time to be spent on campus, or more time to be spent together, critically. There will always be those peak times in the year. And the relationship with colleges and schools, that sort of physical engagement with those may also require a different response model in terms of how we work with them, how much of that is in person, how much of that might be online. And that's something that we'll need to work through together. So we'd expect to have some flex around all of that, and also to recognise that there'll always be those peak times. But in any case, that minimum of 2 days a week would be pretty standard. We'll obviously look at flexibility. The team already has some flexibility. There's a relationship with core business hours, particularly when we think about that customer service component. We need to be responsive to our customers and when they're around, but we'll look to achieve whatever flexibility we can whilst we've got that core alignment. Andrina, is there anything else you wanted to add to that sort of routine activity?
I'm almost going to say it's not routine, because we continually revisit it and learn from it in every single cycle, and we try to take forward what we've learned, what worked well. We try to leave behind what was less successful, so we don't repeat it. So I think it's that kind of almost ability to be, I'm going to use the word agile because that's the right word, but it's that kind of agile growth and change all the time, that continual review. And across the piece, for me and for the team, it's predominantly driven on that customer service. It should be seamless for the customer. So there'll also be a part in the role where we will all have an understanding of what everybody round about us does. So as much as you might lead on a specialist area, we will all need to have a working knowledge and understanding, so that if that person is on leave or is busy with something else, we can pick that up across the team. So I think in some ways it's exciting, because it allows you to learn lots of things and not just get locked in to one direction. And that continual revisit and learning the whole time encourages always to be getting better. So it's just something to consider. As much as it feels at times that you're just going to be doing the same thing, there's actually a lot of growth and a lot of chance to learn new things and see the business in a different way. But that's all I would add on that one.
Excellent, Raymond. We've already referenced the fact that some activity will continue to reside in the colleges, so I just wanted to give a little bit more flavour as to what that is. So first of all, everything that relates to the 25-26 timetable, which we published just a few days ago, all of those responsibilities remain with schools and colleges and just as per the current arrangements. So whether that is finding solutions to unroomed events, whether that's change requests relating to other matters, whether that's new activity that's identified downstream, all of that remains within the schools. Where we'll see the change then is in January 2026, when we start the preparation for the 26-27 academic year, and that's where the new operating model cuts in. That's the point where most of that timetabling activity will shift to the centre. The things that we expect to remain in the colleges, at least for this transitional period, are things like lecture recording opt-out, and that might be one that always stays within the colleges. Reviewing and disseminated the published timetables, submission of change requests, and any updates to lecture details, so changes from those originally submitted when the timetable was created. And that just reflects that those are very local, very specific, and certainly during this interim period, the best place for that to originate is with the colleges. But they are transitional arrangements. Once we deploy the new timetabling system, once we finalise some of the process changes, there may be further changes in relation to that. The directors and heads of professional services within the colleges and schools will determine how those responsibilities and resourcing for the retained tasks are organised across their structures. So I wouldn't want to make any more comment on that, and I'm sure in due course they'll be able to share their own thinking on it. Catherine, over to you just to pick up on some of the next steps.
Thanks, Karen. So in terms of next steps, most people will know that there are some colleagues within this kind of cohort here and at the next information session who do a lot of activity on timetabling, and then we have a large number of people who do less activity. So we have a small number of people who do a lot of activity who we would look ideally to transfer over to the new team. And those individuals will know who they are and they should have had an initial conversation already. So we would look to kind of work with those individuals first off to align them to the new team structure. So we will be getting in touch with those individuals later on this week, and that will be directly, likely via myself or via another people in OD colleague. And primarily that would be to appoint to the grade 6 and the grade 7 roles, which are currently ring-fenced, a small number of individuals. And we also have a very small number of people ring-fenced for a transfer over at grade 5. So we would prioritise working with those individuals first of all this week to have further discussions. Thereafter, we will look at the kind of wider recruitment, which will be majority at the grade 5 level, so the timetabling advisors. Now, because we are at the holiday period, we expect that recruitment to those posts to be open probably across the month of July. So I would expect maybe next week we would come out with information around those opportunities. And that's likely to be cascaded via your directors and heads of professional services. The reason that we want to leave that open is just so that everyone's got an opportunity to engage with that process. We know it's holiday season. We don't want anybody to be disadvantaged as a result of their holidays. But if at any point anyone feels that they've not got enough time to engage with this process because of leave commitments, please just let me or your people in OD business partner know that, and we'll do what we can to work around that with you. We'll certainly want everybody to have good opportunity to engage with this process. So I suppose just in terms of summary, the grade 5 recruitment will likely not commence until probably next week, maybe later on next week. but we will make a start in engaging with individuals for the grade 6 and grade 7 recruitment this week, and then that will be open for another week or so beyond that as well. If anybody wants to discuss any of this in more detail, particularly those who are looking to transfer over, please do contact your people in OD partner, and you can contact myself directly as well if that's helpful. So the other thing I'll mention is you should all have access to the SharePoint site. So everyone on this call should already have access to that. Again, if you don't have access to it or you're not aware of it, then please drop me a line for this and I'll make sure that you get that. On that site, we've got the job descriptions, we've got the original staff information briefing slides. We'll also capture these slides on there. And if there's any kind of frequently asked questions, we'll put that up there as well. So just make sure that you get access to that and we'll update that as we go. Okay, I think that's probably everything, Karen, unless you can think of something I've missed.
No, I think that's it. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to open this up for questions just now. I'll stop sharing because you don't need to stare at a slide that's not that interesting, and then we get a chance to some of us to see some of us. I know screens aren't that big that we can see everybody. Thomas.
I've just seen Andrina's eyes just drop there. My question obviously relates to me is that I don't see how this differs, how my role differs. It's basically how will you collect the information from through the Form 1, Form 2 process like we did this year? Because my concern with that is quite a few academics work within their own silo and, for instance, may suggest, oh, I'm teaching this next year, one at Monday, 11 to 1. But then they have no cognizance or realization of how the whole school timetable works. So that would be my question: is how is the information going to be collated? Basically, do you still need my involvement, which I'm happy to provide?
Thanks, Thomas. So we haven't yet finalised what that initial data gathering will look like. It may be very simple, is this course running? Yes or no? And if it is, then let's have a conversation. But it's that conversation piece that will be really important, particularly if there are aspects that there is a desire to change, and that could be a massive change or it could be quite a small change. So understanding that and figuring out how that fits within either the rest of the school timetable or the subject area, or indeed the estate, so that we're not asking for things that simply don't exist. And that's really the role of the business partner, the timetabling partner, sorry. So we'd expect them to be having that conversation with the relevant academics, with others in the school, initially as part of that knowledge transfer, but then longer term taking that on and picking up the conversation where it needs to happen. I think we know that each year there's quite a lot of change, but sometimes those changes are things that, well, I'll just keep asking for that, in 1 year I'll get it. But if it simply doesn't exist, let's just stop asking for it. But maybe that information is not sufficiently widely disseminated, and that's part of that engagement between the centre and the schools to make sure that there's really good understanding. Does that help? It probably doesn't completely answer the question, but I think that's because we haven't said that it'll be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a transition thing, things change, things adapt. So I'm just basically, I'll be on. I in the school we're reluctant to let academics near anything because they tend to, I think no one can understand why Tuesday's a popular day for the whole university, but yeah, I'd like to change mine to Tuesday 11 to 1. Oh, good luck with that. And they have no desire to see where it fits within the rest of the timetable. And as we have like the same group teaching over different cohorts, them suggesting a Wednesday 11 to 1 just won't work. And especially if we're trying to move towards giving students choice of everything, we always say, they always say, oh, the students still have enough choice. We can never have enough choice unless they've got a choice of everything. So that's my challenge within the school. But yeah, no, that's very helpful. I'm aware that these things have to evolve to then find the best practice eventually. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Thomas. Scott. Scott. Scott, I'm sorry, your sound is really broken. We're getting half a word in three, I think.
Is that any better? Is that any better?
Only very slightly.
If you want to type it into the chat, Scott, we can pick it up
That's
through there. No, not particularly.
I'll type it out. It's got to ask them.
Scott, I'm going to move on to the next person, but if you want to type your question into the chat, we can pick it up. Thank you. Jill.
Hi there. Oh, I think Helen was before me. Guess Helen, do you want to go?
Okay.
Okay, I can do it. Thank you, Jill. I'm Helen Lloyd from the medical school. I had two questions I wanted to ask. The first was, is there a date at which the system which will succeed my campus will become public knowledge? And my second question is, the individual conversations with timetablers, which was mentioned by Catherine, that are likely to take place this week. How will they sit against the ongoing review of the professional programmes in relation to the setup of the new timetabling hub?
So I'll pass the second question to Catherine. On the first question, yes, it will, but not yet because we're in the procurement standstill period.
Okay, sorry, I thought procurement had concluded. But...
Yeah, but then you go into, so yes, we've concluded the process, but then you go into a standstill period as part of it.
Okay, thanks.
Helen, so for the conversations this week, or the contact this week, that's for the small number of people who are ring fenced to the grade 6 and the grade 7 opportunities. So I would reach out to those individuals directly. So forgive me, I don't think that includes your staff. But in terms of for the wider recruitment, I'm aware there is obviously a review going on about the professional degree programmes. So we're hoping, obviously, because like grade 5 recruitment would be out for longer, then actually that would allow for any kind of outputs for that process to go on. But if that's not the case for your staff, Helen, then just give me a shout separately. I think it is.
Yeah, you know it is. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
No worries.
Thanks, Helen. Jill.
Hi, thank you. Apologies if it's been asked already, but I believe the team forms in October. When might staff migrate from their current team to the new team for training? And a second part of the question, for those staff that are interested in the grade 6 that may not already be ring fenced, can they apply for these roles?
So again, I'll answer the first one and let Catherine answer the second one. As I said, the activity that's cut over to a new operating model will take place in January of 2026. So we're looking to have the team on board that couple of months ahead so that we can do that training, onboarding, get people ready for the new year. I mean, what we don't want to do is have, one person starting every week between now and the end of October. But it may be that we bring people in a couple of tranches so that we equally don't have 20 people all arriving on the same day. But it's that October date gives us the couple of months lead in terms of initial training and onboarding. Catherine.
Yeah, so in terms of your other question, Jill, so Again, for this week, we are prioritising engagement with the individuals who we are looking to transfer over, and some of those individuals are within the defence community for the grade 6 and the grade 7. It's possible after we've continued that consultation with those individuals that we will have vacancies at grade 6, potentially at grade 7, depending on the level of interest, that we go out to wider recruitment, but we certainly want to prioritise those individuals who are most impacted, so we'll be engaging with them first, and then if other opportunities exist beyond that period of engagement, we would come out via heads of professional services and via the local community contacts, just to let people know that. So we will be in touch, but we just want to prioritise the individuals who are most impacted at the moment.
Okay, thank you. And sorry, a third thing I've just thought of, for semester 2 timetabling, would this then lie with the new team, or would it still be kept in-house, so to speak, while the new team are forming together? Because there's usually quite a lot of prep to do just before semester 2 as well.
So is that for the 25-26 timetable?
Yeah.
Yeah, or everything to do with the 25-26 stays with the colleges and the schools as per the current arrangements.
Okay.
So that would include prep for semester 2. Yeah.
Okay, maybe a wee bit of a deficit. Okay, I'll take that forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
So
I'm picking up the question in the Q&A for Caitlin. Caitlin, do you want to ask the question, or are you happy for me to read it?
I'm happy for you to read it if you're happy.
All right, I'll read it, that's okay. So Caitlin had put in the Q&A, she was asking about responsibility for the rest of session 25-26, and then the continuing to plan for edit and prep and what will be 26-27. So almost similar, I think, to Thomas's question about what comes next beyond the current session. So really, her question is about, would the local team be prepping for edit and prep in 26-27? You happy for me to answer it, Karen, or do you want to pick it up again?
I'll make a start, and then you can tell me what I've got wrong. So the intention is that the new team picks up everything that is associated with the 26-27 timetable. So by starting in January, picking up and leading on that edit and prep activity. Now, to Thomas's question about, are we filling in Form 1 and Form 2 again? Whilst we haven't defined how that initial information will be gathered, there is a possibility that we would do that earlier. So, maybe the equivalent to Form 1, is this course running? That may be circulated earlier than the January, but that would still be managed by the central team, whether that is the expanded team or the current team, that will be managed. So in effect, everything about the preparation for the 26-27 timetable sits with the new team.
Thank you very much.
Anything you wanted to add to that?
No, that's absolutely right. Well done, Karen. You passed your test on that one.
Oh, thank you very much.
The other question that Scott's now put into the chat and Teresa's added to it is a question about local space. So how will local space work under the new system? Who will control that? Will the local teams still be responsible for booking local rooms? And that how does that relate? This is picking up Teresa's one. How does that relate to very specialist labs that are used for very specific activities?
So the project board, the program board rather, for the integrated program is currently looking at what our policy with a small p position is around local space. The proposition is that during that edit and prep period and the room allocation period, the central team would be able to room into those local spaces that activity which would normally take place there. So if it is biology level 1 labs, then the central team would put that, allocate the room to that activity for those lab groups. Beyond that, and for other uses of the space, so meetings, etc., once the timetable is published, that local management can kick back in. So the central team wouldn't be putting other activity into locally managed space beyond that publication of the timetable, and they would only be putting teaching, which you would normally expect to go into those spaces during that period. So that's the proposition that the board are looking at the minute. at least for this transitional phase. We know there's much bigger changes downstream with things like Keystone coming on board that will change for a lot of lab activity, how that is managed. And there are other conversations going on about longer term provision of local space and management of that. But for now, that's our proposal. If the board think differently, then we'll revisit exactly what those arrangements are. But it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to say, well, we're going to take all of this activity to the centre, but then the college still has to manage all that allocation of rooms and what's happening. We'd end up tying ourselves in knots. Helen.
Hi there. That brings to mind one peculiarity about medicine's timetabling, which is that on our 3-floor library in the Wolfson Medical School building, we have 6 small teaching rooms, which are very heavily timetabled into. Now, we use that space for assessment as well at various times of year. And am I right in thinking that the centralised hub would not engage in timetabling for assessment?
Well, yes. So we wouldn't be timetabling those assessments or managing them, but in the same way as provision is made for the centrally managed exam diet, that space is blocked out rather than that's in when we create the data set. So one of the things that we'd want to understand is, well, what are those dates when those rooms need to be used for something else like that, so that they can be blocked in and then everything else gets timetabled around it. So it's exactly the same process as we have for places like Hunter Halls and Butall, etc., around the exam diets. So I would suggest we just do the same. So their space is reserved for that activity, but then the planning and management of that activity obviously stays in the school.
Okay, so stage 1 is for us to identify all of our exam dates, and then let the hub know. Okay, thanks.
I'm going to pick up Jean's question and then I'm going to come back to you, Mike, next. Is that okay? So Jean's asking, will the new timetabling team timetable hybrid events that take place with other universities?
So I guess it depends what you mean by timetabling them. So if that is a teaching event for which University of Glasgow has responsibility and we need to schedule it and allocate a room to it, then yes, absolutely. If that's about the engagement with the external, the other universities in terms of what's going to be delivered and when it's going to be delivered, that would expect to stay with the school. But the output of that to say, actually, these are the 10 classes that are being hosted by University of Glasgow, or where our students need to come together to engage in that activity, would absolutely be part of that information sharing, and for the central team to create the events if they need creating, schedule them, room them.
Thank you.
Mike, you had picked up about picking up on the comment on local space about CMIS licenses. Do you want to add something to that? Thank you.
I'm just thinking, I imagine there's going to be some sort of general reshuffle of CMIS licenses and review of who has one and all that kind of stuff, along with this centralisation of the hub. So I'm just thinking in terms of, if we're having to book like an ad hoc event or something, can be a meeting, could be something within local space, practice rooms. Are we thinking that there will still be timetablers within the administration teams or people that have a license to be able to do things like local space bookings then throughout the year? Is that the intention?
Yeah, so at the minute there's different roles. So there is the school timetabler role, in terms of a system access, etc. There's also a local space manager role. And they're quite different in terms of the permissions that they have, but the local space manager can absolutely make those bookings for non-teaching activities, so meetings, etc., etc. So certainly one opportunity is to retain that. The other thing, we've got increasing amounts of local space and central space being managed for those non-teaching activities through the app, so that you've got more user-defined activity or user-controlled activity. So that's one of the other things that we'll be wanting to explore over the next couple of years, how much of that non-teaching space or space that may be used for multiple purposes could actually be made available through the app, so people can self-serve. But certainly at the minute, we would anticipate that local space manager role would continue for a period at least.
Okay, so things like using the timetable and room booking app approvals would still happen at a local level rather than that being taken.
Yeah. If there's an approval on it, then yes, we'd want to retain that local approval. Yeah. Emma.
I was just wondering, so obviously we do have a couple of areas that have agreements where they get priority bookings into a space. So I'm thinking of the Claris Piers, but I know it applies to the Adam Smith building as well. And at the moment, a lot of the preparation work for that is done at school level. Is that something you see being taken on by the hub and just by the business partner person, or has that sort of been thought into the model at all?
Yes, so that because it's the teaching activity that gets prioritised. So there's no reason for that to take a different approach, because it's not about what the teaching activity is. It's about the room that it gets allocated into, that we have kind of a special arrangement. So all of that will just come over to the centre in the same way as any other teaching activity.
And the next question in the chat is for Jill, and Jill's asking about the change request and how, if the resource moves across into the central hub model, will there still be that ability for the local teams to have seamless licenses to submit change requests for things that have happened or have changed since the timetable gets created? So
you're right, change requests will stay with the school team in the main. And the way of doing that is part of that to be defined. So we may just use exactly the same system that we use now through that timetable manager functionality that we've got, and have read-only access, so that you can still get the critical event ID, which is the bit that you need fundamentally for that. Another option would be to use Avanti, but then we wouldn't necessarily have the event ID. So we're just working through the detail of that. But you're right, change request submission will sit with the schools. The processing of that will sit with the central team, and how we make sure that the relevant people within the schools have appropriate access to be able to obtain the critical information is one of the things that we're exploring just now. But it may mean that there's a small number of read-only seamless licenses within the college.
Okay, thank you. I think other schools likewise with ourselves are probably just trying to plan ahead as to how we'll manage resource. So I do understand it's still coming together. It's just the unknown at this stage.
Yeah. It'd be great if we could reduce the number of change requests as well, and then that would just take that away from everybody. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions in the chat. Are there any other questions in the room? No? Okay, well, I'll draw us to a close then. Thank you all for coming along this morning. Oh, Caitlin. Snuck in under the wire there.
I'm so sorry. I know.
That's okay.
As you were saying, I was like, I think I actually squealed. It was just really quickly. What is there an idea of when the upcoming changes might be shared more widely across the university? As in like with managers, etc. Because I'm thinking
Yes.
of course approvals, for example. Those kind of processes will probably need to be at least somewhat reflected on, just to kind of make sure that we're capturing it in time.
Sure. So there has already been some information cascaded through the directors and heads of professional services. I think there is also a plan tomorrow, so after this first meeting, for a wider communication. But I think a lot of, so what does that mean, will need to be picked up within the schools and colleges, because I guess a number of people reading that thinking, I've no idea what this is talking about. But Catherine, am I right? We've got a broader communication going out tomorrow.
So certainly it is something that we're very aware of that we need to do. In terms of actually a release date for that, I wouldn't want to be certain about it. I know Sharon's back tomorrow, so we can pick that up, Sharon McGregor, so we can pick that up with her. But yeah, certainly there will be wider communication so that everybody knows about it. And again, our priority was just to speak to the people who actually do the work and to prioritise communication with yourselves first of all before we can do a wider piece. But we certainly will be sharing that information really soon. That's how I would summarise that.
Thanks, Catherine. Jack.
Hi there. Yeah, I put my question in the Q&A section as well. I was just wondering if you could speak a bit more about sort of overall rationale behind the centralized team and sort of what evidence there is that that model works better. Just sort of from my experience in life sciences, like things like the predicted numbers for course sizes this year, we had to change a lot of those because we thought that that would create a lot, that would create further change requests down the line and probably a lot of time, because rooms weren't large enough rooms were allocated and stuff like that. So just things like that worry me a little bit in terms of further centralization, sort of losing the insights from those local teams. So I was just hoping you could speak a bit more about the sort of overall rationale.
Yeah, so in terms of the student numbers, so I think that's a really interesting one, and where we'd always look for insight from the schools, from RCMOs, from admissions, etc. And it's an area that we know is there's always a bit of volatility, and we know is going to change with things like Curriculum for Life and other curriculum transformation. So regardless of whether we move to a centralised model, the direction for the university has for some time been that we have a different approach to predicting numbers. It's always been a bit of a dark art, and we probably get it wrong more than we get it right. Now that might not be materially wrong, that might just be a difference of 3s or 4s or 5s, but that kind of variability creates huge inefficiency in the way that we utilise our estate and can prevent that response to growth or change or whatever it is. So that intention to have a better way of predicting has been something that's been on the cards for a while, and it's obviously something that's materially important to routes to enrolment and to other programmes and indeed to income growth. So that may have changed in any case. I think this year there were a number of challenges around all of that. So we were trying to build a model at the same time as apply that model. But however we do it, however good that central prediction becomes, we would always need to look to insight within the schools and colleges, and that's what that partner role will be doing. So taking that, this is the prediction based on all of these factors, how does that land? Are you seeing something materially different in terms of likely progression rates? Are we seeing something materially different in terms of applications, so that we can work that through? And also, what's the consequence of the introduction of things like Curriculum for Life or other curriculum transformation? So the numbers bit may have changed in any case. Looking at why we're moving towards a centralised model, so the university currently is unusual in the sector, both nationally and globally, in having this highly devolved model. And what we see is lots of inconsistencies arising from that may impact on student experience or on staff experience, on our ability to have really good insight at the centre in terms of future plans, or in the short term, what is likely to happen next year, etc. So with the advent of the Keystone building and the way that will completely change how we think about a lot of aspects of teaching and timetabling, and with that real drive to make sure that we're using the space that we've got available to us to the very best that we can use it, and bring about some other transformational change, the logical conclusion of all of that, from the analysis that we've done, from talking to peer institutions, from looking at what happens globally, is moving to a centralized model gives you much more flexibility and adaptability to be able to do that. And that's been the key driver.
Thank you.
So, Thomas.
Hi there, Karen. My question is more of the sort of the more holistic thing. Because of the transformation team, is everybody on board? Is my question, because as we had the start of like last September, recruitment seemed to go rogue, and all of a sudden, I don't know, it was 32 schools had far more students than was ever predicted. I always find it quite puzzling that we have admissions meetings where we meet targets and we set targets and we say this is the school's target, which almost seems like the whole process is they try to cajole us into taking more students. And then even if you get beyond that stage and you're quite happy, I'm quite content with where our admissions are sitting just now. Come September, somebody's went rogue and it ripped up our whole level 1, level 2 timetable. And they just ended up with a poor service. You know, we had to do certain things where, you know, you couldn't have everybody in a lecture at the same time. We try to replicate that with double teaching for this year, but that's only on certain subjects. But if someone goes rogue again, then I feel for the new team for 26, 27, because obviously holidays are banned in September for you all.
Only September. Yeah,
but I just meant that they tend to go rogue in that sort of month, you know, not then.
All right. No, it's a point well made, and I think that was one of the so we've seen that 2 or 3 times in probably as many years, and that's one of the real drivers to getting a better predictive model coming from the centre that is taking into account things like, you know, real-time admissions data. You know, what are people applying for? What are they accepting offers for? What does that mean, particularly at undergraduate level and in the general degrees? What does that mean in terms of likely course choice? And therefore, what change does that make for class sizes and student numbers? But also looking at continuing years, you know, are we seeing any variation in progression rates? How do we apply, if you had a big surge in one area for the intake this year, how is that likely to disperse across a range of subjects into the next year? Because that's just where we have not been very joined up in the past. So things like the Routes to Enrolment project, this central forecasting, and then looking at the work of that broader timetabling activity, trying to make sure that we are all much better aligned and can respond and adapt. And that will include things like saying, you know, what's the latest we could go before we say, yeah, that's the timetable, that's the room allocation, that's the class size. Well, we might not change that next year, but in future years, is there an opportunity to flex something like that so that we're working on the very best data? It'll never be perfect until we've got student enrolment data, or maybe we've got some indication of course choice. So making sure that we can keep alive to that, but we're getting much better predictive data through a model that is consistent, and not relying on, you know, the very best spreadsheet that I can do and the very best bit that because I know these 3 people and they'll give me a bit of insight. We need something that's much more consistent across the organisation and can track those. If we see a bulge in one area, where else is that going to pop up? Because otherwise we tend to think about it at single subject level, and that's not very helpful if students are choosing 2 or 3 or 4 subject areas. Work in progress. Thanks. Okay. If there is nothing else, sorry, somebody else.
I was just double checking. Nothing else in the Q&A, nothing else in the chat. Unless anybody on the call has got anything, I think we're done.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for your time this morning. If questions that occur to you after this meeting or in the days ahead, please do drop us an email. I think the information that was cascaded with this invitation probably included the email address, if not,
Yeah,
and the microsite and all the rest of it. So please do get in touch with us if you've got any other questions, or if you want a one-to-one conversation. I'm sure that can be facilitated as well. But in the meantime, thank you all very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.